Welcome to another episode of B2B Marketing Futures. Today we are diving into one of the most important shifts happening in our industry, B2B go-to-market in the AI era. AI is not just another tool in the stack, it's fundamentally changing how buyers discover, evaluate, and engage with companies. From content creation and search behavior to measurement and team structures, the traditional GTM playbook is being redefined in real time. In this episode, we'll explore how marketing leaders are adapting to these changes, what's breaking in current strategies, and what needs to evolve to stay effective. But before we jump into the discussion, I'd love for our guests to introduce themselves and share a bit about their background and current focus. So, Lisa, maybe would you like to start? Welcome.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here. Lisa Bonanno. I have 25 years in B2B marketing in the tech sector and really looking forward to a great conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. Welcome. Rashmi, welcome.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here as well. I consider myself a scholar practitioner. I've worked in B2B GTM and marketing. I'm a career marketer, and I am also an adjunct faculty in marketing at Columbia University SBS and the University of the Cumberland. So, really excited to have this discussion with this amazing group today.
Welcome. Thank you so much. And Ander, welcome.
Yeah, it's nice to meet the fellow guests on the podcast. And Joaquin, thank you for having us on. My name is Ander Frischer. I've been doing SEO in one form or another for the past 12, 15 years, depending on how you want to look at it. And I've been focused in B2B most of that time. Currently, I am working at Gong and leading our SEO and AEO efforts there as well.
Really interesting. Thank you. Thank you so much for those great introductions. Let's start with the big picture, right? AI is already reshaping how marketing teams operate day to day, from content production to targeting, measurement. What are the most meaningful changes you're seeing in how B2B companies approach go to market today? And where is AI genuinely adding value versus where it might be overhyped?
I think I can get us started and we can all contribute to the discussion. But I think what's happening is that there's a lot of rigor around using AI in marketing operations. And one of the key reasons for that is the scale that it offers, which I think is not overhyped. I think it's making us a lot more efficient and faster in getting campaigns out in market, and also producing content at scale. But I think that's essentially the content production piece is where we need to be a little more cautious, because there definitely is an oversaturation when it comes to messages and a lot of generic content that's out there. So really, that human element and that personalization that we talk about is getting diluted in the mix. And I think those are two dichotomous aspects of AI application that we're seeing more and more today.
I would agree with that. I think that one of the biggest opportunities is obviously the scaling of content, but that does come with managing the risk of having all that AI produce content out there. And at Gong, we've actually created some workflows where we've been able to scale content production with human-led inputs that I actually still consider to be very authentic. So there are certain ways around it. But the other thing that I think about when I think of how AI is reshaping marketing and reshaping the day-to-day is it's changing a lot of the value that we as individual marketers can bring to the table. Whereas before, there was a lot of value I find placed on how much can we get done in a certain amount of time. And what AI is allowing us to do now is really double down on the ideas that are really working. So we can spend our time as humans with the context that we have about our industry and about our company and come up with these great ideas that we can then use AI to execute and scale.
That's what I'm seeing, Ander. I'm seeing more of a quicker iteration of what's working. And then to your point, at scale, right? So it's like, how do we bring together our persona information, our content bites, what we know about the buying behavior or what's been working so far, and then give a good prompt that can then tell us what kind of content to be putting in front of this person or this account at this time. And then you refine it, right, as you go. So as things are proving to be more successful, you kind of add that into the recipe, and is constantly kind of learning and improving like a flywheel on its own, which I think is fascinating. I think that the buying
Absolutely.
behavior is, in marketing, we thought of it as linear, right? You do this and then you do this and then you do this. And I think AI is completely changing that on its side and allowing us to think about all the different places that our prospects and customers are natively going, and how can we show up and kind of meet them there with the right piece of content at the right time for where they are in their journey, right? So I'm Italian, so I talk about recipes a lot, but like it changes the recipe, right? And it's like, different ingredients.
I would love to come back to that non-linear behavior in a second, but
Yeah.
before we get into that, I would love to come back to producing content at scale. And I was listening to a podcast this morning, Neil Patel's podcast. I don't know if you follow Neil Patel.
Yeah.
I really like his podcast, by the way. And they were analyzing Alexander Hormoz's content strategy. I don't know if you know Alexander Hormozy, but he's really popular in the startup world, creating enterprises, and he has millions of followers on YouTube. They were analyzing his content production on YouTube, and he's publishing more than 100 videos a day in a period of like 10 hours. So it's like 10, 20 videos per hour, and basically are all of them generated by AI. However, from a human-led input. Okay, so he's recording some workshops, and then he's editing every single part of the video, like the hooks, everything. I would love to know, what are your thoughts on that? What are the risks? Because you mentioned, Rashmi, at the beginning, that we need to be cautious
Yeah.
with content created at scale with AI. What are your thoughts on
I
a
think
strategy like that, for example?
that kind of approach, I would be candid in saying, is probably not well thought through. Because what AI is doing, to Anders' point, is giving us a lot of time back to reinvest in understanding our users, consumers, prospects better, but also identifying what content, what channels resonate most. And so, just because we can and therefore we must put out content there is probably not the best approach. And I'm saying this with no conscious evidence of how these videos are performing, but also how much time users are spending consuming this content, right? So I think with having the ability to scale as fast as we can, it is also a responsibility and an onus on the marketer to understand, what the message is. I don't think the vision should get diluted at the cost of our ability to do things faster. I think vision today is much more critical than anything or any time before. It's always been critical, your vision and mission for a brand and a company, but today it's much more important to hold that central to everything that we do, because otherwise we stray in, and our ability to scale would take away from us the purpose and why behind the things that we do.
The author's mission was to put his message across, and if in doing so you need to tweak the algorithm somehow, and find a way of putting your message out there and show your videos to
So here's
as
the
as,
thing,
as many.
right? Are
Uh-huh.
we trying to be the algorithm by frequency, or are we trying to change the algorithm by sentiment tracking?
Okay,
Right? The sentiment matters as much as volume does, and I think it's important to track that.
And I think
I like that.
consistency, I think it's having the same message very consistently also wins out. So I think we're saying how content for content's sake or content for volume's sake isn't
Yeah.
always the winning approach. But if the content is meeting an end need, and we know the algorithms love a good video, I mean, it just does. And
Yeah.
so, how do you take existing content and maybe, actually, I think we were talking about this before. It's like, okay, you could do a webinar and now you have an asset. And then from that asset, you can pull out sub assets and have it work for you in this modular way. And so that's a scale as opposed to needing 100 videos in 10 minutes, right? So it's like, and where does this asset fall into the buyer's journey, and for who do we see consuming it? And so you kind of think about filling out a almost like a matrix,
Yeah.
of your people and their journey and the asset chunks that we need to kind of tell the ROI and tell the story across the, consideration, buying, blah, blah, blah. And then it may be we need 1,000 pieces of video. That may be
Yeah.
part of the, but I question that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Andrew, you
science
had a thought.
behind it matters. Yeah.
I think the word that I always think of when we think about quality content and balancing that quality
Hmm.
content with scale is authenticity. Are you
Yeah.
creating content that is authentic to who your brand is going to come across, or I shouldn't even say come across, is actually going to be authentically valuable for your audience? And I, there's another aspect of producing 100 pieces of content, especially within a large enterprise, where at the end of the day, if content appears on your website and there is something there that might violate some legal component, or might spill some secret sauce, or maybe any sort of content that says something that maybe we don't want to say, ultimately at the end of the day there is going to be a human on the hook for that. And so reviewing all of that content and really applying that human QA in a meaningful and a thoughtful way is very important for preserving that authenticity and making sure that the content is doing its job in the way that you want it.
I think this is what's so fascinating. It's like, so here we are in an era and we're using tools to help generate content. And yet at the same time, we're saying the most valuable content is content in other people's words, right? So you think about like the
Yes.
G2s and the Reddits and all these other review sites. So using humans'
And
words
the
to describe their experience or the solution or the benefit is really the ringleader of the algorithm. So I almost think it's less about maybe even writing the smartest prompt to generate a widget of content, and maybe it's how do you inspire your customers to help sell more product for you, have them become your evangelists, have them write those reviews and take the phone call and put a social post out there. I was just reading this little blurb about how the C-suite is being encouraged to do more free-form social posts, right, on their own, in their own words, to kind of talk about their experience at the organization and their solutions, and creating heroes out of their customers. And it kind of just helps humanize the customer, or I'm sorry, humanize the organization and bring them forward. So I just think it's almost ironic, right? Like the two sides of this, of needing human in the loop and how it's even higher in the pecking order, but still needing to kind of execute stuff at scale.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, totally agree on the user generated content piece and inspiring customers to become advocates, even past users, I might say. It's become more critical, and that's where AEO is, pulling from in terms of sources. I think what I'll also add is that another thing that AI is helping us do really well is read signals and act on them very fast, right? So I think, to your point, Lisa, the recipe and getting the recipe is changing real fast.
Right.
And it's going to be so critical to understand where different types or ingredients fit in, right? So the AI generated content pieces, including a more humanized, authentic version of what our brand should sound like, alongside user generated content, where does it fall in that matrix? And the funnel structure that is, I don't know if it still exists. It's definitely very dynamic than it's been in the past. So really, figuring out the ingredients and where they fit and what the right mix is for your brand and the channel or channels we're using to go to market is becoming so much more critical. And that's where I think we are spending a lot of our time as well at work, figuring that out.
You mentioned the funnel. Sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
Hmm.
No, go ahead, Lisa.
I was just going to say, I don't think anyone has remastered the new funnel. And if they have, like, I would love to have a chat with them, because I just feel like it's so
Yeah.
iterative, and every company is trying to take different inputs of what's working, what isn't, and trying to figure out how it kind of plays down. I mean, at the end of the day, you still need the booking, right? You still need the revenue.
Yeah.
And so there's a set of actions that you're going to have to follow to kind of get the account warmed up, the human warmed up, and those actions may be different depending on the ASP, the persona, all the things, all the variables. I think what we're talking about is that we're able to listen more through the awareness and consideration stage than ever before, to
Hmm.
kind of see what accounts are bubbling up faster than others, which people within those accounts are showing signs of ingesting information that may show us that they're more likely to buy sooner than later, right? And kind of pull these folks forward. So it's almost like the funnel is still there. And yes, it is still linear, but the actions happening at the top are kind of a little bit more sporadic and crazy. But there is a moment where we're going to say, you're warm, right? And we're going to bring you over and take you down the bottom of the funnel. And I would say, marketing's job doesn't stop there. It needs to really continue down the bottom in partnership with sales, so that, even though there might be an opportunity on the record, marketing should still be going into that account with appropriate content to kind of continue to warm them down to the close. So yeah, I think it's definitely a shifting funnel, but I think the funnel's still there and people are just trying to figure it out.
I was going to say, one of the interesting things, speaking of the funnel, is there's also this visibility gap that is not being covered at the moment. And I'm not sure how we will cover it, of understanding how a late stage prospect, someone who already has a statement of work or a proposal or whatever it might be in front of them, how they are using LLMs to evaluate the solution that you are offering. We don't really
Right.
have any data that tells us exactly how they're doing that. But anecdotally, I've heard stories of 7-figure deals being closed because of the research that executives are doing within an LLM. And that's something that we just don't really understand. But to your point, Lisa, that's why we as marketers have to pay attention to that bottom of the funnel as well, and continue making sure that content is available.
And I think you hit it on the head. So if they're going to LLMs, not just in the beginning, but all the way through, then we need to make sure that we're showing up in whatever that query is. So we need to make sure, and Anders, this is your background, right? It's like, how do we structure our content on our website in such a way that if there's a side-by-side comparison, we're being included in that side-by-side comparison? Or what's the FAQ that needs to roll up so that we are, one, at the table, and then 2, winning the day, right?
Yeah, and I'll also add that it's not just about how the brand shows up or how we show up on our website. I think it's a lot more about corroboration through and through, awareness through closing, where, LLMs are constantly pulling from different sources that say the same thing. So the principle of corroboration, essentially, right? So they're going to be, if your website is saying the same thing as G2 and Capterra, that's what's going to show up in the results. So it's so much more important to really create that surround sound of everything that the brand wants to say, but having users say it and other credible sources like analysts replicate the same thing, and publishers, so that's what essentially feeds the LLM models. And going back to content, I didn't mean to digress, but I think one really cool thing that we're able to do with AI, especially in the context of content, is that keeping content fresher and really pulling it down, or creating that, the funnel effect, which a lot of time just sits in the marketer's head and doesn't really exist in paper, or really creating that journey has become so much more easier. So you're keeping content fresh, but you're also driving people down at the same time by giving them prompts that they, based off of signals that they're displaying in real time. I think that's something that's stellar, that's happening, that we didn't have before. And I think it'll lend to the funnel structure much more robustly in years, months, weeks, whatever. You never know how this thing progresses. But it'll definitely lend more to a more firmer funnel structure.
Yeah,
I think.
I think marketers are going to be asked, if they're not already, to be thinking about setting up those systems. And maybe the word system might replace campaign at one point, but it's almost like, so what signals are we going to listen for, to your point, Rashmi? And then what's our system to kind of support that signal? And it will include all the different channels, that are appropriate, but you're kind of creating the work stream, and then monitoring the work stream, and then iteratively improving that work stream. So it's a little bit of a different mind shift too that I think is happening. And when we say signals, like we sit here and we sound all smart, but like there's so much tech debt at these companies, and right, finding the data to actually queue off of, like it's order of operations. I mean, you can't even think about building the system until you're thinking about what's my data input to kind of queue off of, and like have a smart system to even build.
Yeah.
And also, with how fast
Absolutely.
things are moving right now, as soon as one new AI-oriented strategy or tactic, as soon as we feel like we have one of those down, there's another thing that's happening.
Yeah.
So the speed at which there's this acceleration happening with what we're able to do as marketers that I think most of us can agree sometimes feels a little hard to keep up with.
Sure.
What
Absolutely.
is the most important thing to be doing? Where should we be spending our time when there's 100, shiny objects showing up on LinkedIn every day?
There is definitely a lot of noise. And I think personally, the way I'm trying to break through it is to see what gets me the most bang for my time. So, without naming names, like if I have any favorites that I like to go to, whether I have favorites for different things. So, content creation, my a certain AI model is trained to deliver on that, or campaign optimization, we have a separate tool that I lean on more. I think that's how I'm evaluating tools that I want to spend my time in, where I know exactly what I get out of these tools, but also what's the best use of what's the best use of my time in that sense.
I
No,
think
no,
that
no.
the
Go ahead.
multi-model approach is actually very important, is understanding if
Hmm.
you're using LLMs to scale a bunch of your work or you're using tools that are leveraging LLMs, when is Claude appropriate versus OpenAI versus any of the other tools out
Right.
there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Because like I said, I'm a scholar practitioner. So what's more important as a practitioner versus a scholar, right? Like that are there just there's different tools that work best in different environments. Not just utilizing them for my personal use and at work on the day to day, but also educating the next generation of marketing leaders on how they should be approaching and thinking about some of these things and some of these tools without completely getting overwhelmed, because sometimes in the classroom excel is hard enough to get around and get behind. And so introducing so many different tools can only add to a lot of confusion.
Well, it's funny. We started the conversation around like, there's so much AI tools out there to use, and every company
Mm.
seems to have an AI mandate to, get smart about AI, and no one really understands what that means. And it can feel a little bit like a frenzy. I got to get some AI. I feel like calling it like, the Facebook, it's like the AI. We got to get the AI. Like everyone's just, we don't even know what we're saying, but we're saying it to be
Mhm.
cool and relevant. And I think it goes back to like the content question. It's like, what problem are we trying to solve? Could AI solve this better for us? Is there a tool
Mhm.
out there today that I should explore to help solve this problem? And if like no, 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 then like keep going. You really have to think about that from a very strategic perspective. What problem are we hoping to overcome and solve? And is there an AI tool that could help us do this better, quicker, more effective, so on and so forth?
Exactly.
And
What's the role of brands in this
yeah,
context, right? Because if everyone can
That's
create
a good question.
content, personalized messaging, scale distribution, there is a lot of saturation, of course, right?
mhm.
Even when we want to pick the right AI tool, there is saturation. Imagine creating content with these tools. There's even more. So
Yeah.
what does the role of a brand in this environment? Is it becoming more important as a signal of trust and differentiation, or is it evolving into something totally different?
I think
I
it's
think
so
for
critical to humanize the brand. Again, like going back to what we started with, like it's so important for brands to appear as humans or have human qualities much more than before, and for those qualities to show up and the values to show up in real time, and not just one, for the reason of humanizing the brand and driving connection, but also because the user is evolving. Even multi-generationally, we see that different generations resonate better with different things, but millennials and Gen Zs and beyond connect more with brands that have purpose and stand for their values and are not and are vocal and talking about those things. And so if we want to stay relevant, I think creating that authenticity and human value is going to be most critical for brands.
one of the things that I find most interesting whenever a brand does this is when they are able to give insights about the problem they're solving through their own data set. We have something at Gong called Gong Labs where we analyze conversation data and other revenue data points across our massive data set, and we're able to actually share things that are unique. And I think that is part of what's important about that is the uniqueness and the fact that it's only coming from a particular brand. So if there's a brand that has, you can almost say like a moat with the types of insights that they're able to offer, I find that that's very compelling.
Yeah, I definitely concur that the role of brand is even more important than ever before. To your point, content is a commodity now, right? Like anyone can generate it. So that's not the thing. And more important is defining what is our brand. You think about like the positioning statement and the messaging architecture. It's like, how are we different? And in driving that consistency of how you're different, Rashmi, to your point, in all the channels, right? And so even as you think about your executive team and them going out and posting stuff, it's from the same piece of music, right? They're all saying the same thing consistently and humanizing the experience of that brand through the same use of words. And then you think about like all the tools we have on the customer side to really harness that. Communities, I think, are going to have or already have a great role in supporting everything we're talking about here. So having a place for customers to go and find each other and solve problems collectively and together and human to human, chat to chat, right? There's something very special about that. And I think companies that really do that well are probably going to have higher renewal rates and just be able to harvest the goodness through those type of channels too.
Something comes to mind as we talk about this, Lisa. I think in marketing or in the business context, we've never considered people, whether that's when I say people, like internal people and executives, as a channel, right? As a forum for generating word of mouth or promotion. But we are our best advocates. And I think the storytelling aspect and extending that consistency, like you said, across people, treating them as a channel and bringing them into the fold and measuring against that is going to be key. I don't think we're thinking about that right now as marketers, but how do we evaluate word of mouth, from our own people? Treating our employees as a channel is something maybe we should look at. Another aspect is, which I hate to say it because I used to hate it when senior leaders would say this, but storytelling, 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 storytelling.
True.
Like you said, using the same source, the same music to deliver the same message consistently across channels, across people, across users. I think that's the surround sound that's going to change the narrative, build the narrative, and set organizations apart from their competitors and peers.
Yeah, one thing that comes really evident, I believe, in the AI era is that brand matters more than ever. When everyone can create content at scale, what really sets apart companies are the true connection they build with their audience. But at the same time, most marketing teams are still stuck in execution. They are spending time researching accounts, finding the right people, managing campaigns, even researching the new AI, like
Yep.
the new thing. So, what we are building, at least at SACT, is a different way of working. You allocate budget, and the system takes care of the rest. We find the right companies, we find the right decision makers, we run and we optimize the campaigns for you, and we combine everything back to revenue. And actually we can track personal level intent, so you can actually see when the people that you have been reaching through your brand activity start to show real buying signals. And that means that brand is no longer something you just hope works over time. You can see which companies and which decision makers are exposed to your campaigns and how they move from awareness to consideration. So at the end of the day, brand is just not hard to justify anymore. It becomes measurable. You can tie it back to pipeline, to revenue, and you can invest more on brand. And I think the big shift here is that people spend more time focus on brand and building real connections with their consumers instead of managing campaigns or finding the new tool or tweaking the algorithm of LinkedIn or tweaking the algorithm of YouTube. And you really focus on what really matters. And with that in mind, I love to finish with one question. If you had more time to focus on brand and customers, what would you do differently, and what's actually currently getting in the way?
I think what's so interesting about what you just said is, brand has always been this soft thing. We can't measure it. right? I don't know about a PR, AR. Like, how do I measure the effectiveness? It just feels so soft and squishy. The CFO doesn't understand it. It's just so hard for marketers to kind of justify the elements needed to elevate brand, right? And now we're in this AI era where we're all agreeing on this panel that brand is more important than ever. And so I'm hoping that there's a shifting conversation around brand isn't about your icon or imagery, right? It's about these words that you're using and the feeling you're giving people when they are near your company. And so I think what might be interesting is I'm kind of going to watch for this. I mean, COVID took a turn, right? And we were not doing events. Now we're kind of back to events. And I think that in person, the face to face is going to become even more important to driving those connections that people are dire for. At the end of the day, it's a human buying something from another human. We are human to human. I know we talk about B2B, B2C, right? We're B to H. We're like, or even H to H. We're human to human. And people want to know that they're buying from another good human that's going to have their back and take care of them. They're not going to lose their job because they bought their thing, and they're going to be a partner in their growth and their success. And that comes from building those relationships from the moment they kind of come over to your front door, all the way through to them becoming an advocacy and renewing and buying more from you. So I think a little bit of a shift, not that digital is going anywhere. I mean, digital is still in the recipe, but I think a little bit more face to face might be taking a share of the budget.
I love that direction. And for years, I think B2B marketers have struggled with how to bring emotion into the picture. That's why we try to mimic consumer marketing or see how, because it's easier to do that. To lead with emotions on the B2C side. And I think it's gonna be interesting to see how that evolves and how we are able to do that more with AI and with the noise that it creates. So really looking forward to seeing how that evolution happens and how, we kind of we lead with emotions a little more. And I think we've played safe for a really long time on the B2B side. I think it's now becoming okay. Really say the things that or stand for what we believe in. So we'll see how that goes. But totally agree that in person is going to be very, very critical in the next couple of months and years.
And one thing I think is also important with digital still being obviously a very important factor in this H2H selling is that the siloed approach to different marketing channels really needs to be broken down because at the end of the day, your brand is going to be bigger than the sum of its parts. And it's not just about what you have on your website and what you have happening on your organic social and paid search and all of your other channels. It's how all of these things are working together. And I think that a change that is necessary for marketers to really stay relevant is to think cross-functionally. And for people who
Mhm.
are individual contributors to really think outside of the channel that they work in and think about how the work they're doing applies to the collective picture of the brand and making the brand authentic and human.
Absolutely agreed.
That's a good point. I wonder if we're going to see organizational structures start to shift too, a little bit less of functional experts and a little bit more of system experts. Or I've even heard the term like a revenue pod, right? We're all kind of working together to kind of move through
Mhm.
the buying journey. So I'm kind of watching that too to kind of see how where we put the people in our teams needs to be adjusted as well.
Absolutely. Definitely seeing the role of marketing, demand generation, and even brand evolve. Like within our own ecosystem, I think we are constantly trying to pull marketers outside of just their piece of the pie because the pie is not that big and it's a collective pie, everyone owns it. And I think getting marketers out of that mindset of this is my, like, healthcare is all I focus on, or tech as an industry is all I focus on, and seeing their collective impact on the business and across channels, and really getting a better understanding of how do we really go to market, and how do the things that I do influence everything that everyone else is doing. Basically, if you look at personas, we are all basically talking to the same account, like different people within the same account. And so removing that sense of ownership a little bit, and making it a collective is definitely an evolution that I'm already seeing in motion.
Exactly. And if you analyze all the good brands, and most of them are B2C brands, they have a great culture behind. They have an organizational culture and leadership that they have been building for decades. And probably in B2B, we will need to start doing the same and start being less boring and being more
Yeah.
emotional. But
Yeah.
you don't just switch an enterprise organization to be fun the day after because you want to be fun. You need to start changing things from the top, I believe.
Yeah.
Right, believing in your vision and changing your culture and the way you work with employees, with providers, procurement. Everything needs to change if you want to transmit a new brand to consumers. At the end of the day, brand is holistic, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's like taking some bold strokes and putting yourself out there and being a little vulnerable.
Exactly.
I was reading, it was like, what was it? Nike and Apple do this really well. They're not the cheapest and they're not the, well, you could say they're some of the fastest. Um, People are attracted to them, right? There's this magnetism to those two brands. And so we have to ask ourselves, why? What are they doing? And how could that essence be replicated on the B2B side where people are just drawn to what you're offering, how you're offering it, how you're treating your customers, whatever it is that your brand stands for.
I
And
think it starts with culture,
yeah.
because when I'll be honest, like just across the B2B in, I guess, ecosystem, companies that have strong cultures where employees are strong advocates of the brand and of the organization, like they automatically stand out. They don't even have to
Mhm.
invest in marketing or making themselves look good, because the biggest cheerleaders do that for them, the customers
Mhm.
do that for them. And I think, just going back to everything that we've said so far, like humanizing, authenticity, vulnerability of brands, I think everything stems from culture. And also fun is something that we miss, right? Fun starts at the top. So let's get our C suite to become more fun and embrace fun as a core value.
Also having that consistently across all of your channels, whether it's out of
Absolutely.
home or digital or in person, whatever it might be. I kind of joke and I say SEO doesn't stand for search engine optimization everywhere. It stands for search everywhere optimization. And having that consistency
Yep.
to bring that fun across everywhere is really important. And that's what helps get it done.
Love that.
All right. Well, this has been a really insightful discussion. Thank you all for sharing your thoughtful perspectives on this topic. It's clear that we are in the middle of a fundamental shift in how B2B marketing works. AI is changing a lot of things, but if anything, it's reinforcing the importance of brand trust and truly understanding your customer. Thank you again, Rashmi, Lisa, Ander, for joining us today, and for everyone listening. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and share it with your team. We'll see you in the next episode of B2B Marketing Futures.